Welcome everybody to the April 2023 edition of the third Thursday training. And we just had somebody jump on. Glad we have Joe there who's joining us. And you might be getting ready to join, or you may be watching a little bit later. But either way, we're excited that you've joined us. We do this every month in an attempt to give our association churches and pastors just some good tools and encouragement and information for things that could help in their own ministries, and maybe even things that could help them fulfill their mission there in your location. So we are thrilled this afternoon to have Casey Lewis with us. I first met Casey when he was actually a pastor in our association there at Sycamore, right outside of Decatur. And so we got to know each other, served on some teams together, went through Dangerous Pastors together, that program. And so really grew to love and respect Casey and what he did. And he's since moved on. He's doing some different things now, some creative endeavors with photography and web design and all sorts of things. So welcome, Casey. Why don't you tell us just a little bit about yourself, a little bit of background, where you're from, tell us about your family and what you're doing now.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Dave. Glad to be on the, show, whatever, resource, whatever you guys want to call this.
It can be a show, yeah.
But glad to be on here and provide some insight. I've been married for 14 years now. My wife and I have two boys, 10 and, one just turned 10 today and one turns 8 next week. I'm originally from Savannah, Georgia. So go Dogs. Went to the University of Georgia and graduated from there. And
man, you're riding high right now.
Oh man, for sure. Definitely. I am. But I worked in corporate America for 4 years before going to seminary. And I went to seminary there in Fort Worth at Southwestern and got an MDiv. And then I moved to Decatur and started pastoring at Sycamore Baptist Church there in Decatur. I was there for 7.5 years. And during that time, I went back to school and got my doctorate of ministry and preaching at Southern Seminary in Kentucky. So flew up there for a couple years and, did that deal a couple times a year. That was a lot of fun. Then I moved to Red Oak. So I'm pretty much all the way across the Metroplex to Red Oak, Texas, where I pastored at Eastridge Baptist Church for 2.5 years. It was like more of a revitalization effort. And anyways, things just didn't work out, long story short. And so I ended up having to resign from that position. Since resigning for the past 1.5 years, I've been running my own web design and development business, CL Creative. And I've also been doing photography, which I had been doing kind of previous on the side, even when I was pastoring in Sycamore and then here in Red Oak as well. But I've been doing that, do a lot of like corporate headshots and, stuff like that, real estate type photography. But I'm mainly focused a lot more on these days, web design and development, but I lump in photography as a service for my web design and development. And then I do have more corporate type photography accounts where I'm doing that. I do some family photography and whatever people really want me to do. I did some newborn photography not too long ago for one of my neighbors. But I love the creative arts, that's what I've always been interested in. I did a lot of that at the different churches that I was at. Both of them were, revitalization type efforts and needed a lot of rebranding as well as just a new web presence, digital marketing, all of that kind of stuff. And so at both of the churches that I was at, I completely rebranded everything, redid both of their websites, maintained that on a weekly basis, podcast, all the stuff at the church, all the marketing, social media, everything like that. I pretty much handled that on a week-to-week basis, along with my other pastoral duties and preaching and everything like that.
Yeah. That can end up being quite a load.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it can be a lot. I think probably, if I broke it down, maybe like 15 to 20% of my week was doing all of that kind of stuff. And then the rest was, everything else that a pastor does. But I didn't really have anybody to do that. Now, when I moved to Eastridge, I did have some other guys that helped out. Like we had some people in the sound booth and some people who managed like our streaming and things like that. So that was super helpful. And I let them do that for sure.
Yeah. Well, for those of you guys who are watching, one of the reasons that I asked Casey to join us was to talk specifically about websites and specifically how that topic might be important to and apply to churches in an association like Harvest, which typically smaller churches, many rural churches, a lot of them with bivocational pastors. So, Casey, which churches, so you know our association, you know kind of the demographics of it. Which churches need an online presence of any type? Why would that be important? Like which churches, is it just big churches that need that, or can small churches benefit from that as well?
Yeah, I mean, my thing is, I think everybody needs an online presence, especially these days. I mean, that's really the online is the front door to your church. Like it used to be, people were going to come, they're going to walk in, they're going to visit around the community, a couple of different churches. But nowadays, what people are going to do is they're actually going to go to your website and they're going to check out your website and see like, what do you guys have to offer? They want to maybe hear some messages and things like that. They want to read about what you believe. So I think that every church needs an online presence. And I know that some people might say, well, that's just for younger folks, right? Like they're the only ones who are checking things out. But really, like, I mean, times have progressed. Those people who were the younger folks are now like the older folks now. I'm 42. It's just pretty crazy to think about. But people who have kids that are anywhere from my kids' age, which are 8 and 10 and even younger, all the way up to people who have kids that are graduating from high school and moving into college. So in their 50s, I mean, these people are still going and checking out websites, seeing what a church has to offer. And so I think, and even more so as we just kind of move through the years, in 5 to 10 years, those people who are 50 who are checking out websites are going to be 60. Yeah. And you can have a whole nother group of people who are coming up and maybe they've moved off to the city and now they're moving back with their kids because they want to live in a suburban or more rural type place to be around their family. And so I think more than ever, having some sort of online presence is going to be key because that is the first place that people are going.
Yeah. And like you mentioned, it's even for small churches, even for rural churches, because one of the, COVID did a lot that was awful. One of the things that we're seeing though, we're even seeing it here in Nocona, which, we're population 3,000. We've been 3,000 since the 1940s. So it hasn't fluctuated. We haven't had huge groups of people move in or out. It's stayed pretty steady. And yet with COVID, that cut a lot of people loose from an office job. And so because they were able to work remotely, because they were able to work from their home, they didn't have to necessarily live 15 minutes from the office. And so now we're seeing a lot of people from the Metroplex actually move out to this area, buy property, build a house. We've got fiber optic cable, so we've got high-speed internet, which was, I think, forward-thinking infrastructure-wise by our city government. But so we're drawing a lot of those people, and even a church like ours, which traditionally has only drawn from the immediate community. Now we got people coming in from the Metroplex looking for a church, and they're going to look at your social media pages, your website, those kind of things. So even for, and like you mentioned too, with the age, I've got my parents, so my mom and stepdad and my dad all have Facebook pages. They all have social media. And they're in their mid 70s, early to mid 70s. My mother-in-law, who's nearly 80, she has a Facebook page. So the idea that even people up into their 70s and 80s aren't familiar with online stuff, that's just not true.
Right. For sure.
It's the world we live in.
There are some, that kind of reject that still, but
yeah.
excuse me. But for the most part, like, I mean, their kids are buying them iPhones and Android phones, and they're learning how to use them. Like, it may be a few simple things, but they like to get on Facebook, see their grandkids, keep in touch with their friends, things like that. So you're even getting an older crowd now that is becoming tech savvy. And you mentioned COVID. I think COVID definitely sped a lot of this stuff up, because churches had to figure out something like, how are they going to deliver a message to their congregation? Well, they had to come up with some sort of streaming type service, or record it and show it later. And people just started getting really used to that. Now, I think there can be a disadvantage to that, because now people think, oh, I can just stay at home, I can watch church on TV, and that's church. And I don't think that that's correct, but we can really utilize that for people who are homebound, or people who are traveling, or their kids are sick. Like just this last week, for instance, for us, we had to stay home because our kid was sick, but we were still able to watch our church and worship on YouTube with them, and they do it live. We can talk about the advantage of live versus not live a little bit, but that's what they do. So that gave us the opportunity to do that. And now they make a big point, even before the live stream begins. Our pastor comes on and he talks all about, like, basically, like, this is not church. We're glad that you're tuning in today. We're glad that we're able to offer this to you, but we really want you to be involved. Do not take this as a substitute. And that's like a pre-recorded deal, but it comes on like every single week. So it's really pushing at people to say, hey, we need to be at church. So
yeah, that's a good reminder, I think, for all of us. So we mentioned social media. We mentioned things like Facebook pages or YouTube channels, those kind of things. Is it enough for a church to just have a social media page? What would be the advantage of having a website sort of alongside that? So what would a social media page not be able to offer that a website could?
Yeah. I mean, social media, just to hit on that for just a moment, social media is very helpful. Like, you can share devotional type content. You can record videos and put those on your social media page and share those out via Facebook. You can post blogs, you can post encouraging articles for your congregation to read. So there's a lot of advantages to having a social media page. Like you mentioned earlier, everyone has Facebook, everybody's clued in. And so putting out announcements via social media can be very helpful. But the advantage to having a website along with your social media, just because you have a website doesn't mean you don't have social media. And I think just because you have social media doesn't mean that you shouldn't have a website. They serve two different purposes, really. Social media being the more highly engaging, quick messages that you're sending out, or getting in front of people as they're scrolling through their feed on a regular basis. There's this one ministry, Pro Church Tools, that I followed a lot in the past, and they were big on seize the 167. So there's 168 hours in a week, and so they're saying, what are you doing the rest of the time to minister to and disciple your congregation? And they were saying that one of the things that you can do is sorry, I had a call come in. One of the things that you can do is encourage them through social media. So seize the 167, use social media, but keeping in mind that that's what social media is for. It's kind of immediate, it's temporary, it's getting out quick announcements, it's getting out short devotionals, sharing articles. But as we all know, as soon as you scroll past that, like, you may never see that ever again, And so I think you think social media, like, quick, temporary, get something in front of my people. Your website is more, this is where the meat of the content lives, and it's going to live there as long as I want it to live there. As long as I'm going to pay for my hosting fees, I will have that content and that information there. So things like, and this is where I think the advantage is, with social media, you're at the mercy of how does Facebook or Instagram or whatever other platform that you're on, how do they want to design your page? You know, speaking like your business page, for instance, like on social media, how do they want to design that? What are they going to highlight that other people can see when they come to that? You're kind of at their mercy of that. Or, you know, you might be at their mercy of, we're going to shut you down. You know, you say something on our platform that we don't like, and we're just going to turn your page off. You can't make any more updates, or just, you know, take that content out altogether, and you're not able to post, you're not able to put any sort of messages out or anything like that. So you've essentially lost everything that you've built up. On a website, you control all the content. Like the content is not at the mercy of some social media giant, this other company out there. The design of that content and how you're going to present that to the people, like what's going to be on your homepage, where's it going to be at on the page, how's it going to be accessible to my people? So, you know, things like your service times, or what types of ministries that you have, how you might connect with people at the church to be involved in those ministries, what you believe, you know, like you can put some of this stuff out on social media, but having a designated page that you can go to be able to really sit there and read, like, this is the beliefs of the church. Here's the church's vision. Here's the church's mission. Like, here's what they're trying to do in the community. Here's how I can be a part of that. You know, those are things that you would want to live on your website, that is easily accessible just by little tabs at the top, or mentioning that in the homepage that people could link out to, as well as it's a great place to store, you know, your videos or your audio content in an accessible way. You know, like you may upload that to YouTube, which I think is a good platform, or Vimeo, to have that, to store that. But now you can present that on your website in a way that when people are coming to check out your church, because it's the front door of your church, they can go to the sermons page and they can see, what series have you been doing? You have everything collected nice and neat for them. They can then look at that, watch some of those, listen to some of those, read about what you're doing, what ministries you have. Another big thing is like, where do I go when I show up? Like, what do I do? You know, like we take for granted, if you've been in a church for a long time, like you just come in, you say hey to Joe, you know, you go get your coffee and your donuts and you go to your pew, right? Like somebody who's brand new to the community, like they have no idea where they go, who they're supposed to see, even what the service is going to be like, you know, like how long you expect to be there, what type of preaching you do, what kind of music that you have. All of those things are great places for, or great content to put on your website, so that people can access that all the time. It's not content that's changing a whole lot, you know, it's not dynamic content except for maybe your sermons, but the other, it's pretty static, right? Like your beliefs are going to be your beliefs for hopefully the next 5 to 10 years, right? Or more. Like that's pretty set in stone. This is who you are. Your vision may change from year to year, but your mission may stay the same. Your ministries, of course, are going to change, but they're not going to change from post to post like it would on Facebook. You know, you're going to have a set schedule that people can really go to and see. So.
Yeah, I know we've made it a habit that whenever we travel, if we're on vacation or something over a Sunday, we try to find a local church. And that's one of the ways that we do that, is by checking out websites. And, you know, we know there are like 4 churches within driving distance, we'll kind of look and ask those exact same questions. Well, what is this church like? What is their worship like? What do you wear? Where do you go if you show up? And the ones that really have that information to walk you through from the time you park, where you park in the parking lot, you know, even those kind of things have been super helpful for us. And I'm sure they could for any church.
Yeah. And you can, you know, some of the things I've seen people do in the past is like record a short video of showing like, hey, this is what it looks like to walk into our church. And I mean, it's kind of canned or, taken maybe on another day besides Sunday, but it's a recording of showing people like coming in for the first time and being guided to church. So that might be a little bit more advanced, but just at least having something on your website that shows, hey, this is who we are and this is what you're supposed to do.
Yeah. That's great. So, if a church were going to, we're looking at having a website, what would be sort of the bare bones, like bottom line necessities for a church website? What are things that a church website cannot do without? Just the essentials.
Yeah, for sure. I think that, certainly you're going to have your homepage, which everybody's going to have that, but having content on that homepage that is quickly accessible to people. So, you're, something about your church, what your vision is, what your mission is, where you're located, what your service times are, those types of things on the homepage. But I think bare bones, like what people need to have is like, what is your message? Like, what are you trying to accomplish and do as a church? Oftentimes I'll go to a website and it's like, especially for churches are guilty of this. When I've, looked for other pastorates in the past and things like that, right? Like we all went into the church website and checked it out. And it's like this big, long, massive paragraph. And it's like, get a cup of coffee and like, sit down and welcome to our church and all this stuff. And it's like, you've already lost me. I'm done. I'm going on to the next one. Like it needs to have something that's going to communicate, for churches might be a little bit different, but what I always talk about with my clients is what's your value proposition? Like, what is the thing that you can be known for in a quick, simple phrase that people are going to be drawn into? And so I went and looked at some churches and kind of wrote some of these down, but like some people will put stuff like love God, love people, make disciples of Jesus, or even just like in big bold letters, like welcome to, Nacona Baptist Church. Like, I mean, that one could need some help just because like, okay, great. Welcome to your church. But what are you guys doing? Or another one I wrote down was teaching the gospel for whole life transformation, for helping people live life abundantly in Jesus. I mean, something like that is what I talk about, like by like a value proposition. For churches, a little bit different. It may be more like a quick, short mission phrase, that you're really trying to emphasize. The idea is that people will know by reading that, like, what is this church about? Like, what do they, is there something here for me to look a little bit further?
Yeah.
So that, I think service times, like when do you have service? What are the times? Where do people go when they come for that service? What your location is? Sometimes in rural churches, it might also be necessary to add in next to, say, like a Google map with the link to the directions from the Google map, like add in some landmarks to people to look for. I know I had to do that when we were at Sycamore, because if you typed in the address for the church, like it wouldn't take you to the church. It took you somewhere else, like a mile down the road or more. And so I had to like be very specific, like right next to this link. I'm like, okay, this is going to take you here. And once it takes you here, like go do these steps, or if you're familiar with the area, just follow these steps and directions to get to our church. So putting some sort of way to get to your church, right? At bare minimum, location linked out to like Google Maps, but then you might also want to write some short directions. What you believe, everybody wants to know. What do you believe? Like, what are you about as a church? And a lot of people will put, and I've done this as well, just put like the Baptist Faith, the Message 2000 on there. But if you could add in like, maybe a little bit more, like what are your values? What is your mission? What's your vision? I guess that's a little bit different, but alongside of your beliefs, like maybe what are your values, or how you see some of these core beliefs being worked out can be helpful. I don't think that's necessary, but at least bare minimum, what are your beliefs going to be? What's your church about? And when I say like what your church is about, or like, some people will write in like this long history, like In the 1950s, we got indoor plumbing and, you know, all this kind of stuff like that. And it's like, well, I mean, that's great, but, you know, just what are you guys about? Like, what's your mission? What's your vision? Who are you trying to reach? What makes you maybe different from the church down the street?
Yeah.
Who's your leadership? And I would say it's pretty crucial to include pictures and like good pictures that you can actually see. You know, like it brings no value to put on some blurry picture that's like cropped out of some family photo or something like that. Like, just, I mean, this day and age, you could just take that with an iPhone, like in portrait mode, if you found some good lighting, and utilize that on the website. If you can't afford to bring in a professional photographer, you don't have someone in your congregation that can do that. But pictures of your leadership, I think, is huge. And then who your leadership is. Like, people often want to go and read about the pastor, know a little bit about him. You don't need your whole life story on there, but I think people definitely want to know who's the pastor. You know, is he gone to seminary? Has he not gone to seminary? What is he like? You know, so somehow bringing that personality through, I think, can be helpful. Like, even just in the books you read, or you know, movies you like, or your hobbies, or something like that. You know, so people can relate to you as a person rather than just like, oh, that's the pastor. How do people connect? You know, I think that's huge. Like, what does it look like to connect? Like, what do you offer? What kind of groups do you offer? Sunday school, home groups. If you offer Sunday school or home groups, you know, who are the teachers of those? Is there a way that people can get in contact with them prior to coming? If it's a home group, like, how are you going to facilitate the initial contact? Should they contact your office, or will you let them directly contact the home group leader so that now they can talk to them and, you know, figure out where they meet, you know, if they meet in somebody's home. You know, what are your upcoming events? I think that can be very helpful as just a bare bones, like, this is what you need on the website. And then along with that, you know, like, utilizing, if you can, like, pictures of your people at your church, you know, possibly some pictures of your service, pictures of events that you're having. And you can use those strategically throughout the website. But then people know, like, these are the people at this church. I go to this church. These are the type of people that are going to be there. And they can get a sense of, will I fit in with them? Will I not fit in with them? Like, should I keep looking? Like, are the, you know, these are my people or they're not my people.
Yeah.
And they can often tell, at least get some sort of idea from some photographs. And what we did at Eastridge is we bought a camera, and we would take pictures during the worship service. We would use that for our social media posts and things like that. But we also utilize some of those pictures on our website and just in other strategic ways. But it was, you know, it's not super, you don't have to buy some super expensive camera. I mean, the nicer camera, the better, because it's going to, you know, perform better in lower light within a sanctuary and stuff like that. But having just pictures of people, I guess. And then, and another thing is, like, what about the kids? Like, every parent wants to know, like, what do you have for my kids?
Yep.
Where are they going to go? Do you have any sort of safety thing in mind that would set a parent at ease? Or am I just going to, like, drop them off and that's going to be it? And maybe they're going to be taken care of, maybe they're not. So if you do require background checks, or for people to go through a training like Ministry Safe or something like that, you know, highlight that on your website in your kids section, so that they will know, okay, like, this church takes this serious, and I already feel comfortable coming and dropping my kids off for them to be with that. Sermon audio or video is better if you can do that. But at least having some sort of that. Sorry, I got a ton of allergies going right now.
No, you're good.
But some sort of sermon audio or video that people could watch. I think people often want to know, like, what are you preaching on? What's your preaching style? Like, is it expository? Is it topical? What, how does this guy relate in his messages? Is this for me? Is it not for me? Type deal. And then like what they should expect when they come. Like, what do you wear? When does your service begin? Where do I go when I first show up? How long is it going to be? Just even like telling people, hey, we preach out of the Bible. You can expect the sermon to be 30 to 35 minutes. You can expect the singing to be about 20 minutes. And it's, a blend of traditional and contemporary, or it's all contemporary, or it's all, whatever. Just so people have an understanding and an idea of like, okay, I'm going for the first time and I'm going to commit to 1 hour and 15 minutes. And that's, I know I'm going to be there for that amount of time. Or if it's an hour and a half, like, oh, it's an hour and a half. Or if it's, 45 minutes, like, I know before I even go, this is what I can expect. So I think the idea and what I'm trying to highlight here is that really your website for a church should be visitor focused. Like oftentimes we think, well, we gotta do all this stuff and put all these things on there for our own people. Sure, you can. Like, I'm not saying you shouldn't have that stuff on there for your own people, but by and large, your website, you should think of it as the place that people go who are checking your church out to learn about your church. So it's written towards the visitor. Your person who's come to your church for 50 years is going to know what they do when they show up. They're going to know what Sunday school classes or home groups, and they're going to know how to get in touch with the pastor and how you preach and all of that kind of stuff. Like, people are going to know all of that because they've been there forever. But the new person is not going to know any of that. And so putting yourself in their shoes and saying, okay, if I'm new and I'm visiting a church, what do I want to know? And that is what you need to put on your website, which, I gave you a good list of what those things could be. But that's where I think you should frame that in your mind. Like, I'm a visitor. Okay, what do I need to know about this church so that I'll show up on Sunday? Or I need to keep looking.
Yeah. Are there, beyond just the bare bones stuff, is there any, just maybe a couple of maybe creative things that people don't normally think of that a website could do that, that they might be able to take advantage of?
Sure. I think a lot of what we talked about are like definitely the essentials of what you need. I'll say, I'm not saying it's bad, but I'll say that like there are some things that different, church builder type websites will offer that you probably just like don't need. Well, one thing I will say that you do need, like online tithing is a big deal. So like you could probably put that in the essentials category. I would probably put that there. But if you wanted to push that down a little bit into the, hey, there's some features that you can have on your website, I mean, I would put that right on the line, if not in the essentials, because people really want to be able to tithe online. It makes it really easy, and you can set up recurring payments and all kind of stuff like that, right? So I think we should take advantage of that if we can. But some of the things that I don't think that you necessarily have to do, but can be an advantage, is doing like a live stream on your website. Like, some people think, well, I just need to get a live stream on my website and like I'm going to get all these visitors. You're probably not going to get that many visitors to your website for a live stream, just to be honest. Like, it's just, unless you're a massive church, have your live streaming like on your website with like a chat feature and all that kind of stuff. Like, that's just complete overkill. Now putting that on YouTube and streaming it there, or streaming it on Facebook, I think that can be very beneficial if you can make that happen from a technological standpoint and from an internet standpoint. Those are places that people are already at. They can already go and access YouTube on their television, so they can comfortably watch that in their living room without having to try to figure out like, well, how am I going to get the stream from the website onto my TV? Or like, does that mean I have to like huddle up over my computer with my whole family?
Mm.
And the same with Facebook. I think they have like a Facebook Watch that you could download app, at least for Apple TV. I think they do, but YouTube is good because I mean you can access that on almost every single TV, even if you don't have like Apple TV or something like that.
Right.
But you know, what you don't need, I think, is a live stream on your website. Now, if you want to go that route, sure, it's available. It can get pretty pricey to be able to host that and put that on your own website. But I wouldn't like that's a nice to have, right? I think other features could be like a prayer wall, but again, I think that's like a nice to have type deal. Like, and then like you really run the risk of like, what am I going to get on here? You know, like what kind of content is going to be posted? Because a lot of times those are like you can just go and post, and then other people can access that,
Yeah.
and you don't know what someone is going to post. So
Right.
if you want to go that route, go that route. I wouldn't really suggest that. I think that's one of those like nice to have little features that sometimes website builder church ones will add in and say, look, you have a prayer wall. And but I, you know, I don't think you necessarily need that. And I don't think you need to worry about like you can do this, like having your own community or some sort of app that's like drawing your church community together, and hosting that on your website. I don't necessarily think that you need that. Like that's just an added layer of complexity. It's one more thing that somebody has to have on their phone or have to go to your website to do. You're not going to get that much engagement. Instead, I would just say set up like a Facebook group, a private Facebook group, and only invite your church members to it, or only invite people from this Sunday school class or that Sunday school class to that. That is free, doesn't cost you anything. It's a place that people are already at. They're already on Facebook. People are already on YouTube. People are already on these other platforms. Utilize those for the strengths that they offer, and utilize your website for the strength that it offers. You know,
Yeah.
Don't try to combine those two things. I think you can do that. Those are features that you can get. But for a church of 50 to maybe 200 people, you know, out in the country somewhere, like you're not going to get that much engagement to even worry about the cost of it and the maintenance of it and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So what about like online signups, like for Vacation Bible School or youth camp or events at your church? Is that have you found that to be
okay. Yeah, that's one thing I did left out of my list. I would definitely add that for sure. You know, I think that is crucial. You might even put that in the essentials category. You can easily build. I've used not MailChimp, Eventbrite in the past, you know, and you can easily build out a free event for Vacation Bible School in there. It doesn't cost you anything, doesn't cost your people anything. And you can then embed those forms directly on your website for like a Vacation Bible School or a summer camp or something like that. I utilize that a lot. So that's something that I would put in the essentials category. When you have an event, you want people to sign up, that is a place you want to drive them, because you can give information about the event on your website that's going to stay there, that people can come, they can read that. They don't have to find the post, or you don't have to try to pin a post or something like that in your Facebook. They can come directly to your website, read about all the requirements, how much it's going to cost, if there's any sort of price associated with like a summer camp or a winter camp or some camp that youth are going to go to. It's all right there. You can organize it really nice, and you can embed a form where people could sign up directly on the website. So
that's great.
You can even add that in the essentials category. But if you didn't, you could put that in the, here's some functionality you need to know about and really consider.
Good. So if what are some options for, and let me give you two scenarios, because it might be the same answer or it might be different answers. So let's say one of our churches that are watching, they don't have a website at all. Where would they go, and like what are their options for where to start? Or if probably a lot of our churches maybe have a website, but it's old, it's outdated, it hasn't, it doesn't, it was kind of built on an old, format, and it just looks and feels outdated, or maybe it's, they haven't kept up with, it's still got old events on it and old times and old schedules. So would those two groups of people, or those two churches, go to the same place for a solution, or is it two completely separate deals?
Yeah, I mean, I think about, well, I'd say yes and no. And this is why I say that. I think about a redesign of a website a little bit different than a complete like start from scratch type deal. Mm-hmm. Only because, not because maybe the design is great or even the platform is great, but only because like at least businesses that I work with who have a website, they already have content. Mm-hmm. So there's a starting point to say, okay, this is the content that we have. How can we take web design best principles and practices and make this better and more accessible for people? And if the platform you're on is not really meeting your needs, what is another platform that I can move this content to? Likely you will have to completely redesign the site from a design perspective, probably also from a copywriting perspective as well. But you have at least a starting point to begin with. If you don't have any content at all, well, now you're also having to create all of that content first before you then can design the site for content. So I would say both of them are in a very similar position. If your website is just totally not working, you may need to move to another platform. You may not, it just kind of depends. Maybe you just need to update what you have, but at least you've got a starting point.
Yeah. So options would be, they could find an independent web designer, somebody like you, who could sort of personalize. And then are there also like bigger companies that just sort of provide templates that you just sort of fill in? They provide the framework and then you just sort of plug in content. Is that, I'm assuming that's an option as well.
Yeah. So, you can go kind of the DIY type route where you would go to, and there are several companies out there. Some are better than others, and the cost varies, but you can go to church, something like Church Plant Media or the church.co, Nucleus or Clover, or there's Ezekiel. There are a number of different website builders that specifically focus on churches. Mm-hmm. So they'll have templates that are kind of pre-built for a church, pages that a church might need and some functionality that a church might need. Now, usually they will set that up for you, but you have to go in and add in all the content and the pictures and that kind of stuff. Like there may be some stock content, there may be some stock pictures, but if you're going to really personalize it so that people get a feel of your church when they go to that website and they're like, okay, these are my people, I'm going to go visit, or I like, what they have to say, what their mission is, and they can get kind of a feel of your church, then you're going to have to spend a good amount of time personalizing these templates. And if you want to do anything outside of the template, well, you're not going to really be able to do that. Like it's just pretty locked in. Like this is what you get, and you make the best of it. So that's an option. That's a route to go. Of course, you could hire somebody like me who will build you a completely custom website. I would design everything from the ground up and focus on like what content they have, what ministries, and all of that, and then build the website, the design and the website on top of everything that the church wants to do, so that you get a complete custom feel. People really understand. The advantage of that is that you're going to have somebody who's going to help you develop that content and the assets like pictures and icons and all of that kind of stuff. Like you'll have somebody walk through that with you. The third option could be something like a consultant type role where you say, well, I don't know if I want to go completely custom where I'm going to just have somebody completely design and develop a website for me. I like what some of these other website builders have that focus specifically for churches, but I want somebody who can come in and consult and help me write the copy or help me pick the pictures and really craft that around my church, but utilizing those particular platforms, you know. And so you could hire a web designer to do that. Like, you know, I'm not here to necessarily promote myself, but somebody like myself who's been in ministry for a long period of time, who knows exactly what churches need, and now you maybe moved into that space, somebody like that could really come in, even from a consultancy standpoint, and really help a church do that. So I think there's 3 options that you could go. So more what this church, you know, church builder, DIY, put all your own content and stuff in, completely custom, or kind of like a consultant type role.
Yeah. So when we talk about kind of maybe a church that has a website that hasn't been updated in a while, what's a good time frame? Like, we haven't really changed our website in X number of months or X number of years. What's a good, just sort of, you know, rule of thumb that, you know, you really need to kind of a fresh feel, a fresh look, you know, what kind of time frame would they be looking at to reevaluate?
Yep. And I think it depends on like what you set up with to begin with. You know, like if you've got something that looks like it's from the early 2000s, like definitely time to upgrade. And sometimes you can even get some today that look like that, right? Like, don't go with that. I mean, designs obviously change. I don't think you have to change your complete website design every single year or anything like that. But a fresh update could happen every, you know, 3 to 4 years, where you're really assessing like, hey, does this match where our ministry is at from a brand perspective? You know, like, I mean, church's ministry and all of that, we want to keep all of that in mind, but you also as a church somewhat have a brand identity. And, you know, is your website communicating your church's identity at its current design and at its current place? And so assessing that, maybe just assessing that quickly on a yearly basis, but maybe looking to say every, you know, 3 or 4 years, okay, would it benefit us to do a redesign? But then I think also, like, on a monthly basis, if not a weekly basis, just assessing some things on your website to say, okay, do we have old, outdated events that are on there from last month? Or did that event end and is it still on our website, but it happened last week? You know, when people go to websites, if they see that you haven't really updated it in a month, or, you know, even if it's just like a couple of weeks and that event is still being displayed in some banner at the top of your page and it's like from last month, people begin to paint these pictures of, well, you know, they're not really technologically savvy, like they're not up with the times, like, I don't know if I want to go visit there. You know, it just kind of puts this impression in people's mind that, and you may be completely with it, right? Like, technologically, you just don't have a plan to assess these things on a weekly basis. So I think even just setting up, you know, some ministry leader, if you're blessed to have a secretary or something like that, that's working with you, like just looking and seeing like, okay, are all of our events, did they close out? Are we not displaying something that we're not currently doing on a website, like on a weekly basis, just putting that in the weekly rotation. And whenever things change in your own ministry, I think definitely need to make sure that you're making those updates on the website, because again, like, the website is for visitors. And so visitors aren't going to know if you have a new Sunday school class, or if a new home group, or even if a home group is not meeting any longer, or you're taking a break now for, you know, your Wednesday night activities for the summer. Making sure that you're updating your site as things are changing in your ministries, even if that's just schedule changes, so that people will know, like, okay, when after summer, now they're going to have their Wednesday night back, or, you know, whatever it is that you're doing. You know, so just making sure that you're not highlighting things in pictures of people, right? Like, people change. So don't have a picture of your pastor from the 1980s if he's been there for 50 years. Like, he looks different today. even just other ministry leaders, like in 5 and 10 years, like they change a lot. I go and do headshots for a corporation in downtown Dallas, and they have people come in after they've been there for 5 or 10 years and get a new headshot, and they're like, yeah, I've been here for like 5 or 10 years. They told me, like, I don't look the same, so I don't look the same as my headshot, so I gotta get a new one. And yeah, well, that's true. You don't look the same as you did 5 to 10 years ago. So making sure you're keeping images updated.
Yeah, that's good. So kind of one last thing. Some of our churches may be thinking, I don't have a website, and we don't have the money, we don't have the time to be able to devote to that. So understanding, of course, that there's probably a wide range of options. Why that cost wise, there's a big range, probably the time that it takes to devote to it. How much time and money should a church expect to invest for a decent website? And is it possible for a small church with a bivocational pastor to have a functioning website?
Yeah. So to address like the time, I think you can, depending on the feedback that you can get from people, like say if I'm developing a website for somebody, for instance, I usually tell people 4 to 6 weeks, sometimes 8 weeks, but it really depends on how much feedback you're going to provide me. So I'll get my work done, and now I'm waiting for you to give me feedback on the design. So I think that's the deal. But then also, like, how much time can you, if you're going to do it yourself, how much time can you devote to the website, to creating content? And how many people do you have to help do that? So I think somewhere in like a 4 to 6 week type time frame, if not longer, depending on the time that you have to devote to that. As far as like costs go, I mean, you can get a minimal cost website for something like $500, maybe, but then you're going to pay like on a monthly basis for that website to these different companies, right? So you're going to pay anywhere from $50 to $200 for a website on a monthly basis. Yeah. Now, if you went with like a designer, then you're going to pay a larger upfront cost because you got to pay for their time and all the effort and things like that. But on the back end, you're going to pay a minimal cost because all you're going to be doing is paying for the hosting. So that usually runs like anywhere from $275 to $300 a year to host, whereas you may end up paying on the front end like $2,800 to $5,000, just kind of depending on what all you want and the time that's invested in that. But on the back end, you'll save because you're only paying like once a year to a hosting company. Yeah. So it depends. But I think to answer your question, like you can, even as a church with a bivocational pastor that has a small ministry, like you can definitely have a website and you can have a digital presence. I just think that you have to say, and you have to have like a mind shift of, this is the front door to our church. So if we want new people to come, then they are going to go to our website. And if we don't have a website, chances are those people are not going to come to your church. The only way they're going to show up is if someone invites them and they're like, I know this person, like I'm going to go. And I'm not saying that just because you have a website, all of a sudden your church is going to blow up. You definitely need people inviting their neighbors, inviting their friends, inviting their coworkers. Like most of the time people are going to come because they know someone there. Yeah. But they're still, even if you invited me to your church, I'm going to go home and I'm going to Google it and I'm going to look at your website and I'm going to say like, okay, Dave invited me. Like, do I want to accept this invite or not based on what the website looks like? Yeah. It's just like if somebody invited you to go out to eat with them or to a bowling alley or whatever, right? Like you may just go and Google that real quick and like, do I want to go to that restaurant with this person?
Mm-hmm.
Like, do they even have what I like on the menu? So, I think that you have to say, this is kind of the way that people are doing things these days. And personal invite or not, they're probably still going to go check out my website. And I need to put my best foot forward and prioritizing that from a dollars perspective to say, okay, what can I do to make sure that the first impression that someone has of my church is a good first impression?
Yeah.
And the digital presence, I think, is huge. And so, yes, it does cost for sure, but prioritizing that in your budget for the year, because that's probably how some growth, is going to happen at your church.
Yeah. Yeah. So really to see it as not just an expenditure, but as an investment, this
Right.
is, we want to be seen as well. It's the same. I mean, churches that put money and effort into making sure the front of their building, has the lawn mowed, and the flower beds are nice, and there aren't doors hanging off the hinges or broken windows. You put money into that to present a welcoming presence, and I think from a digital perspective, that's exactly what you're saying, that your website is as the front door of your church. So investing money in that ultimately for kingdom growth. So
yeah, that's right. And I mean, I think we all know Jesus is going to build his church, website or not, right?
yeah.
Like, people are going to get saved, website or not. So I don't think a website is an end all be
Mm-hmm.
all by any means of whether your ministry is going to grow or not. But if we're looking at some things that could be helpful, which I think that's what we're doing in this conversation, a website is very helpful. We all go on the web and check all kind of stuff out. And sometimes we just think, well, people don't do that with church, and they do,
Mm.
and we just have to wrap our minds around that and trust that Jesus will build his church, but also utilize some of the technology that's out there and some of the abilities that maybe our members have, whether that be financial abilities or whether that be technical abilities, to present a good digital presence.
Awesome. Well, man, Casey, I appreciate your time, effort. You've given us a ton of just good info and stuff to think about and consider, even as we look at our own churches and our digital presence there, our online presence. So we're going to put your contact information we're going to link to that when we edit and publish this, so that if people want to reach out to you, they certainly can, and maybe just get some information or more consultation. But man, we appreciate what you do, and the value that you provide to the Church of our Lord. And so God bless you, and we will hopefully see you next month, Harvest Baptist Association, with our next edition of our Third Thursday training, and we'll get that information out to you in just a few weeks. So thank you guys for watching, and we will catch you next time.